You are invited to sharpen your command and leadership skills at the 2024 Blue Card Hazard Zone Conference. It's coming to the Sharonville Convention Center just outside Cincinnati, Ohio, September 30th through October 4th. It is 5 full days of command education and training at this year's Hazard Zone Conference. We have 21 instructors, networking opportunities, and this is a place to become a better incident commander. Register now at hazardzonebc.com. We'll see you there. Welcome, everyone, to the B-Shifter Podcast. It's John Vance today, Nick Brunacini, Terry Garrison hanging out with you. Glad to have you along for the ride, and we are ramping up for the conference. The pre-conference starts September 30th. We are going to be there for the main conference October 3rd and 4th. Sharonville, Ohio. As of now, there's about 100 seats left, so it's close to sold out. You might be able to get in still. So go to hazardzonebc.com and sign up. It is a great networking event and learning event for incident commanders and fire service leaders. And today we are talking about fire service leadership with a program that Nick and Terry have put together called Silverback Leadership. Can you, for those who are newly anointed B-shifters, let us know what the Silverback Leadership Program is all about.
Well, let me start, Nick, because I want to make sure that everybody understands that we think of ourselves as curators, distillers of Brunacini and everything that he put together throughout his entire career in the fire service. So what happened was, and we've said this a few times on the show, is that Brunacini had boxes and boxes. He had a room full of boxes with leadership information. And that included his books that we'll talk about here in a minute or two. And we took all that information, and Nick asked me, it's probably been 2 years now since I retired. And Nick asked me, hey, can you come together and help me kind of sort out this stuff? So the leadership program that we're putting together is, originally we thought it was a repackaging of Bruno's stuff, but I think it's even more than that. We distilled it down, and there was so much information that is what this is about, is all the leadership information that Bruno learned throughout his entire career and how he used it, and then how some of us have gone off and used what we learned from him. You, as a matter of fact, John, have used it in your organization, some of that information. And that's what we're doing, is we're going to take that information and we put it together in a program that has about 8 functions. And we're going to apply all those functions. And the key to all of this is, how can a leader of an organization, or leaders of an organization, instill that their membership understands what's important in our delivery system model, and then what's important in providing service to our customers. And then Nick says it better than I do, and I'll let him do it here in a minute. And then how do we provide an added value service for our customers? And really, that's the goal of a leader, right? That's the goal of the fire service, is to provide a service. So how, as leaders, can we ensure that best service possible is being delivered to the customer consistently and in a safe way?
Like Terry said, there were boxes of stuff, and there was a box of leadership scenario material for no-brainer management. Then there was another box that had a bunch of boss behavior pamphlets in it. And then there was probably, I'm guessing, 24 boxes, maybe, banker's boxes.
Oh, yeah, at least.
At least, the minimum. And that was after I went through and threw probably another 10 away that had other stuff and consolidated into everything I wanted. The project my dad was really working on the last 10 years of his life was the leadership stuff. And so he had written a couple books, the customer service book first in the 90s. And then he followed that up with A&P of Leadership, probably, 7 or 8 years later in early 2000. So those two books are kind of the leadership management ones that he wrote for like service delivery. It's just a general concept in customer service. And then he was doing two different programs, functional boss behaviors
and no-brainer.
And no-brainer management were the two workshops that he was going off and doing. Right. And then, man, some people that are listening now will remember a million years ago, he did a thing called Executive Edge. And that became so popular that like the I Chiefs ended up hooking up with him and they got involved in it. And then he quickly gave it to him and said, I'm going to do my own thing. So whatever happened there. But he essentially took the Executive Edge leadership class he was doing. And that's where functional boss behaviors and no-brainer management came from. And so a lot of that content was all in those boxes at the end. And at that same time, I ended up buying my brother out of the business, so I took the whole thing over, and we're finishing this building, and a bunch of other stuff was going on. And so it's like, okay, I got all this stuff, and like in the priority basket, I want to go through this, but I just don't have the time right now, and there's other things we got to do. So I gave it all to Terry and said, hey, man, see what all this is, and if there's anything we can do with it. The other piece of that is there was a book called Cool Command my dad wrote that is pretty much a finished manuscript. And now I found all the art that kind of goes with it and supports it. So that's another thing that has just been sitting there. And you're like, okay, that's more of a senior advisor piece of the Blue Card universe. So, but all of this kind of comes together with the leadership of a fire department and how it goes. So I gave the stuff to Terry and said, we'll figure out if there's anything that we can do with it, So we ended up taking Fire Department customer service back from Oklahoma State University. They weren't doing anything with it. It just sat there and kind of, they had been disconnected from my father for a little while, so they didn't know what they were going to do with it. And so they got a hold of us and said, hey, we got this book. And we said, yes, we want that back. And so we got the book back and we reprinted it. And we reprinted under the name Fire Department Customer Service. So we lost essentials off the front because that's kind of indicates that essentials is Oklahoma State OSU stuff, fire protection publications. So we got the book back, reprinted it, and started looking at the content. And so Terry said, well, based off of everything, like your father loves functions. And so there's 8 functions of leadership here. So they're kind of the 8 pillars, and you have, as we go through those. And then there's an introductory module that kind of, starts the whole program off.
Yeah, he was really good at taking information and packaging it up for each audience. But the information that he was packaging up was around the same themes, right? So over here you had no-brainer management. Over here you had functional boss behaviors. And those were 2 different classes that were packaged up a little bit different. But the main themes throughout those were the same themes that were kind of in the customer service guide and the AMP. So when we pulled them all together, it's like, well, this makes sense. Here's how this kind of matches up. And at the same time, before he passed away, when I was a fire chief in Glendale, he was coming to the city of Glendale and meeting with our command team, I think about every month. It started off being not so frequent, every couple months, and I think he enjoyed doing it. And what he was doing is he was throwing all this against us and getting feedback. I think he did that better than anybody, where he'd have an idea or a concept or a theory, and he'd take it out and he'd talk to firefighters about it. And probably people listening here didn't even know at points in their career, if they were talking to Bruno, they were probably giving him some feedback and some of the theories that he was going to use later to train people, because he was just excellent at that. So he was doing that with the Glendale Fire Department, and so we were fortunate. So when Nick asked me, and I had retired from Glendale, it's like, oh, absolutely, I'll take every opportunity I can to jump in that. But it took about, Nick, almost a year to kind of figure out the functions.
Well, just to go through it all and organize it, make sense of it, and say, nah, this doesn't go here, this fits here, and this book supports this. And so, and really, I mean, I don't know, it's probably been, 4 or 5 months now. Yeah. You had like the whole overview of what it was going to look like. I mean, we wrote it on, you put it on a board, and we thought, okay, this. So we've been adjusting it. Well, crazy, but we've been dicking with it, like you say, probably now seriously for at least about the last year. Yeah. We've been chewing on it and meeting periodically. Well, the intro's done. So our plan is, well, it's like every 4 to 8 weeks to have another module up and running. So we're still, the program's not all the way finished. The first module's finished, but we know what the whole thing's going to look like. It's just we got to put it together now. Right. So, and it's going to be mostly online, to be honest with you.
Is this going to be a standalone program, or who has access to it?
Right now, as we're putting it together and developing and creating new content, is we're going to post it up in the CE section of the B-Shifter website. So if you have full access to the CE modules, you're going to be able to go through the Silverback leadership as we get it up and running. So, and I predict it's going to be about a year to get all 9 modules cycled through there. So as we're doing it, and there's no more charge for it, whatever you're paying now, you get to watch the whole thing as we put it together. So that's the plan at this point. And the first module's done, and I think it's going it will turn out pretty well. And it's really is what's driving me is I worked 29 years in this fire department, and it was a very it was a fun and unique place to have your career because of the way we were led and managed. Right. And it was, and this is what Silverback Leadership's going to do. It's all about the work we provide. And you will see that in the first module, is the work drives everything.
And there was no doubt throughout my career, 30 years working for Bruno, that you knew exactly what his values were, what his mission was, and then where you fit within that in the organization, whether you're a firefighter or a company officer or even a clerk working for the fire department. You knew exactly where you fit in. And so that's what we tried to capture with this. Not only is the added value so critical, but then as a leader, how do you implement that? And how do you use that in your organization? And if you're not the leader of that organization, how do you use it within your battalion or your division or whatever? So I think the hardest part of the entire program was what to leave out, because there was so much information, and we felt like we got pretty much everything we needed to get in there, but we're still finding. Nickel, just a month ago, he comes in, he throws down some notes and napkins that he had found somewhere, and it's like, okay, so now it's notes, napkins, and knowledge that we're dealing with here. So we're still adding the value, and adding that information and some of that content. That's why this is going to be, I think, a work in progress as we go.
What is, for the novice here, what is added value? How do you define what added value is when we're talking about all this? So,
Nick, I think that story with the slipper is how Bruno kind of describes added value, right?
Yeah, this introductory module. Well, the other thing we did is I found a bunch of video of him. We're putting this studio together because of the podcast, and Vance is the DJ now, and you got to have proper equipment and tools and room to do your job, man. Mm-hmm. That's how you add value. Is okay. This is the core of what I do. So for me to add value, I got to do the core first. So anyway, we got all this video. So I find this video and think, oh my God, and he's talking about all this stuff. So it's perfect. And he was asked the question, well, what is added value? And he gives the example. He says, I get a letter, and it's from this family, and they took the mom to the hospital because she had some kind of medical issue. And by the time she got to the hospital, she had her wits about her enough to figure out, oh, the nice fireman took me to the hospital, but oh my God, I don't have my pink slippers. I have to have my pink slippers. So he goes through this whole thing. And so these firefighters just say, okay, they go back to her house, they get her slippers, and then they take them back to the hospital, right? That's the whole story. I said, here's your slippers, ma'am. I'm thinking 15 minutes. Did not take longer than 15 minutes from the time she said, I need slippers, to the time they were standing there.
They were in service. They would have got another.
No, the whole thing. In fact, they may not have been in service because they had just dropped a patient off. You got to prep your ambo. So go get your stuff and then do your little cleany spray thing and the rest of it. But anyway, my dad gets this letter. And it was the slippers. And so he's telling the host who's asking him these questions, he says, this family for the next 50 years is going to talk about this. This is what happens. He says, because 2 young firefighters just did something that their mothers taught them how to do. Is you be nice and you take care of Mrs. Smith and she needs her slippers and it's not anything out of your day and you're already getting paid, and go get her slippers and bring them back to her. And that's what they did. So he says, that's added value. It's that simple. So the core service was them going and treating Mrs. Smith, stabilizing her, transporting her to the hospital. They're all boxes on an EMS form. I took her vital signs, her name, her age, medical history. This is what she's complaining of. We put her on oxygen. We did all these things that is core service based on EMS protocols, right? The added value is the human interaction. It's your bedside manner, if you will. So what they did is they had a customer who was in distress over something that they could easily fix, didn't cost a penny to do it, and it created $1 million worth of goodwill from that person. They got excellent service. So anyone listening today, think back, when is the last time you got excellent service from anybody, especially today? I mean, if my dad was alive, he'd have a sledgehammer to the service industry forever. I mean, he was twitching at the end of his life of how things were. How can it get worse than it was? I mean, that's it. Service has gone to hell in the whole world. I mean, it's just where it's going.
And the opportunity is, if you embed this philosophy into your organization, your department, you will provide that added value service. Mm-hmm. But it's really got to become part of the fabric of the organization, doesn't it?
That's the whole key to this, because there's probably some people sitting around saying, oh, pink slippers, so what?
Yeah.
Well, the key is that you have to embed that. Yeah, that's a great word. We hadn't thought about using that, but you got to embed that culture within the organization that it's okay to provide added value. And if you got an organization that's like you're not looking at any opportunities for added value, you don't even think about it at all, you're not going to get it.
I don't even know if I don't think embedding's the right word even. Because it's the culture in general.
Yeah.
See, like you can embed safety into a blue card operation as a regular element, but to embed like added value, it's too great. I mean, it's like an infecting virus that you get. See, and that was part of what the joy we got to have. Working in the system that we worked in, like the fire department we worked for, is there were things you could do and things you wouldn't do. You knew what you would get in trouble for. And it was like, if you get caught, substance abuse on duty, sex on duty, fighting on duty, and stealing. Those 4 things, and they would tell you, all the big bosses would say, you do one of those 4 sins and you can lose your job over that. We're not going to promise you will, but you're likely going to. I mean, that's the price for dancing over here. On the other hand, on the other side of this line, you show up and you service the customer the way that you provide excellent customer service, where you act like the reason you're here is to go on these calls and deliver this service. If you do that, you're golden. Avoid this and do this, and you can have the time of your life. And so what we did is we ran a pirate ship where we had the time of our life, but the customer was always the focus and centerpiece of it. When there was a customer, when it wasn't, we were the centerpiece because there wasn't a call. You were self-actualizing at a fire station, which was fantastic. But it was a whole different culture back then because it was all around the work. So you could temper the workforce in a way where you could almost quiet like the A-shifter, steely eye, Navy SEAL firefighters, where I do right-hand wall searches this way, and I could make a 30-minute bottle of air last an hour, and blah, 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 blah. You know, the guys you would pick up and use as heat shields at a real fire. Well, you could traverse with them, and they could be a little goofy, but as long as they provided customer service. So it kept everyone centered to what was real and right and correct for the organization. And see, the effect of that was insane. It's the community, I don't know, probably It wasn't that long, but the effect, the community would take care of the fire department. As you wouldn't have to defend yourself because the community was always screaming, "Oh, the firefighters are great," and it was like a rock star type of a deal. Yeah. I mean, it just was. You were like, I mean, you had. If you were on duty, you were as popular as the Phoenix Suns. Mm. I mean, that's just what it had. And we all felt good about ourselves that way. And I mean, you had a lot of B-shift cretins that, like, if they weren't in a uniform, you would call the police and think, oh, my God. And maybe some medical experts to identify exactly what species that was you were looking at. But, man, you put a fire department T-shirt on them, and it's, oh, hello.
And we knew that we were all responsible for each other, too.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to screw that up. You wouldn't want to mess that up. You wanted to provide a service that's like, we're responsible for each other. And if somebody got just a step out of line, and this is a good piece too, is that you may have a captain who gets a step out of line, and you got a crew that said, hey, Skip, get over here.
Yeah. You took care of one another.
Yeah.
I mean, you did. It was, you know, when you talk about like the fractures in the workplace today with the various opinions, and we all want, you know, all of the nonsense and noise you hear, that didn't exist really. And you still, all the ingredients did, but because of the way that we connected and why we were there and the way we were managed and led and what was important, kept all that to a minimum, all that background noise that usually takes over. So, and, you know, Garrison we talk about uniforms a lot, as you know, because that's the low-hanging fruit that anybody, I can make sure, I can see if you're in the right uniform or not. It's easy to say, hey, you know, don't do that. Now, actually, like supervising somebody on an incident's a whole different thing, because there's like decisions and you have to think and understand and make sense of stuff.
Yeah, Bruno had that wonderful hierarchy of where a leader or a manager may fall based on what their priorities are, based on some of their own insecurities, and people that there's people that fall down here and worry about appearance and some of those kind of things. Instead of it doesn't take a lot of leadership to say, put on a bluer shirt today. That one's a little gray. Put on a bluer one. That's not leadership. Leadership's up here when you're actually leading people and you're correcting them in a positive way and say, hey, we need to treat people this way because it allows us to do this and this and this. And it's the right thing to do. But people want to have conversations down here about uniforms and just silly stuff all the time. It's like we need to raise the level. And that's one thing about Bruno. You always knew, like, I would ask people when I was a fire chief in Houston, I would visit a fire station. I would say, what do you think I care about? I was there a year or so, and they go, well, you care about firefighter safety and customer service. Well, how do you know that? Because you say it every time you show up someplace, and every time, thank you, that's what I care about. I care about providing the highest level of service and keeping firefighters safe. There's organizations where you don't know every day it's a new deal. What's my boss care about today? Is it, does he care about uniforms? Does he care about us being, it's just so silly the way some leaders act. And really it should be consistent up and down the organization. And that's why I think, whether you call it embedded or not, but you got to have that culture that matches.
It's just the way we do things.
It's strategic, tactical, and task. You got to match that up, right?
Yeah.
It's all got to be in line, because just like on the fire ground, if you have a fire chief and he has his thought process of what's important, firefighter safety and customer service, and you have firefighters that think that's important at the task level, and you got some tactical level boss who thinks uniform's more important than that, you get out of alignment and you start seeing organizational alignment being a problem for some of those. So you need to fix that. Well, there's a function in there. One of our last functions in the leadership training program, sorry, Nick, is on how do you keep your organization in line. So how do you manage those boundaries and keep people, because it's constant. A fire chief can't show up and say, this is what's important, and then come back a year later and say, it has to be a daily message. Everybody needs to know. There can't be any gray areas.
Well, to pick up with that is So what happens is you say, okay, no, the service delivery is what is important. Right. That's what we put at the top of the pyramid. And then you're going to have the people that are like, well, no, I'm a bureaucrat, and I understand that we need to do that, but you have to maintain strong discipline with uniforms and appearance and grooming and all of that. And you think, well, no, that's not why we're here. Now, we wear a uniform, but excellent saying, it doesn't cause unity. So, and they say, well, they're going to look like bums. They're not going to look professional anymore because you don't have uniform inspection during shift change and whatever. Nobody looked better than we did during my career. And I mean, we weren't uniform Nazis, but everybody wore. And you know, the key to that is when I first got hired, you got a uniform allowance. It was $750. You got it once a year, and we wore T-shirts and
it was
a
separate check that your wife knew nothing about.
Untaxed, also. There was no tax. Okay. It's $750 straight, right? Well, the uniforms during that era, where you got $750, no deductions, were a strong 7.5 to 8. But you would see cats, and they would have beat-up uniforms, and you think, oh, you spent your money on the boat or whatever, it was gone. Now, like Station 24, they said $750 ain't nothing for us. They'd all sign the back of their checks, cut cards. High Card took it all. 8 guys. Yeah. Woo-hoo.
I couldn't afford to work there.
Yeah. They were all smoking cigarettes at the table. The 8 guys smoking cigarettes, cutting cards, screaming.
Bring in the chickens.
That's it.
Yeah.
But what happened is they said, we're going to change this. And then there was like bureaucratic things, taxes and other things, and you can't do it this way anymore. So what they said is we're going to cut it down to $500. You're like, no, God, you're going to cut it by a third. And they said, what we're going to do is you get 2 pairs of pants, 5 shirts a year, and they come to you automatically on like your hire date or whenever it was. So the uniform store could just send them out. So when they made that adjustment, there's no more excuses.
Yeah.
It's like, no, buddy, you get 5 shirts, 2 pants. And to be honest, like I became a captain after that happened. Never in my career. I was the worst uniform offender of anybody I knew, but all my uniforms looked good when I wore them. And mostly I wore them when you were supposed to. Very rarely was I out of uniform. But, I kind of got that reputation. And you wallow in it.
You were in uniform.
Most of the time I was. And they all look good. In fact, Vance, the other day I just pulled T-shirts out of my closet because I'm retired now, and that's all I do is like once a month you do your laundry and that's it. You're done. And it's like towels. Now I found a bag in my garage with a bunch of old Phoenix Fire Department uniform T-shirts. So now I started putting those on. And my wife's like, "You cannot go outside in that." I'm like, bullshit, baby. Yeah, I was a captain that day.
Yeah, look at this.
Yeah, I'm going out. In fact, they still have taxi vouchers in the pocket. Yeah, old Ubers.
And they still fit.
Yeah, they do. Well, they're a little loose, some of them. Right. Yeah, so, which is good because I'd be dead now. I'd be like 400 pounds. So yeah,
you were benching 400 pounds.
Well, yeah, you shouldn't weigh what you can bench sometimes.
We use that uniform example. It's almost like a parable.
Yeah, it really is. It's an example.
So, but the flip side of that, okay, we're not paying a lot of attention. The uniform isn't top of the list. The work is. What are the byproducts and the benefits of making the work the top of the pyramid?
Yeah, so you can manage the entire organization in a positive way by making the customer and the work number one. And what I was able to use it mostly for as a fire chief, now I'll talk from a fire chief perspective, there were some city managers that I didn't get along with because we had different thought processes about who should run the fire department. I thought I should, but I was serving the customer. They thought I should run the fire department, but I should serve them. I said, no, you're not my boss. I report to you, but my boss is the firefighters and their boss is the customer. And that's the way this thing needs to flip upside down. But whenever I would get into a serious discussion with them about budget, finance, resources, I would always pull in the customer. And for instance, what do firefighters want now? What do the firefighters want? they have that bad attitude. What do they want? So you know what they want? They want better equipment to do their job. They want fire trucks to respond to the fire. And that's what firefighters want. They don't want loungers. They don't want TV sets. They don't want bigger toasters. No. They want equipment to do their job to service the customer. That's what firefighters want. And if you go to a fire station and ask them today, what do you guys need in here? They're never going to say better. Although one time in Houston, when I was a fire chief, they was like, you guys need mattresses because this is embarrassing. You guys are sleeping on springs. But firefighters didn't say that. I noticed it as the fire chief, and we were able to get Mad Max, whoever the guy who owned the big store there, provided all the mattresses for us.
The guy who does the bets.
Oh, this guy was awesome. Yeah. But he loved firefighters and provided those. But they weren't asking for them. I went in and saw it. But I think you can use that as you're starting to have discussions with politicians, with city managers, with the elected official, everybody, finance directors. When was the last time you actually explained, if you're a fire chief, and to your finance directors, how what you need impacts your customer service system? And do that in a way that makes sense. It's like, here's why we need this, because for some reason, Nick and I talk about the consumer departments and the conservators departments within a jurisdiction, and a fire department and police department are big consumers because we use a lot of resources and money and people and equipment to do our job. And the legal department, the finance department, and HR, they're conservers. They're always trying to get you to spend less. So you have this back and forth. Every time you bring in the customer and you describe how what you need is going to help the customer, they look at you and they go, oh, wow, really? That's what that does? Yeah, we're not just getting this equipment because it's fun and we want to carry shiny equipment around. This is how it works on the fire ground.
Well, it's the core service. Is that the core service we provide is expensive. You have to buy a fire engine. Well, a fire engine is extremely expensive. You have to have paramedics. It's very expensive to make a paramedic. Now, fire departments could generate an incredible amount of money, but they typically don't because they deliver service. We don't charge for it. It's all part of the taxes. Now, see, one of the things, like, it connects to reality, the core service. And let me use an example, hiring females in the fire service, right? This was a big thing in the 70s when it first started. And we're going to put females in the fire service. Well, there was a lot of resistance to that because, girls aren't as strong as men, and this is a typically male-dominated, and all that stuff that you had there. Well, it's all bullshit, really, until you can say, what do we expect a firefighter to do? Well, I expect them physically to be able to do this. Today, that is called the CPAT test, right? So to be a firefighter, you have to pass the CPAT test. Otherwise, you can't be one because there's the physical requirements to do our job. You have to operate at this level physically. So you make a CPAT test. Well, that hooks up to reality. So now you can defend yourself in court because, like you say, we have connected to the work we're doing. If it doesn't support the work we're doing, then why are we doing it? I mean, really, the community came together to form the fire department. The community owns the fire department. We worked here. This is where we were in Phoenix, Arizona. For 30 years, we did this, and we operated a certain way. And for that, the city paid us the salary and gave us benefits and a pension and the rest. And it was the best occupational employment agreement probably ever. The most fair in the history of occupations. See, all three of us get pensions that are much better than the typical government retirement account. And it's all because of the work we did. So now, if I'm having trouble processing and hiring people, I can justify why is they have to pass this test.
Bona fide job qualification.
Yeah.
Remember that was the big statement before the CPAP when you'd come up. It had to match that. And I remember somebody saying, why do we got to run 2 miles? I've never run. That's a bad park job at a fire, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
2
you're
miles
not.
is way if
Yeah.
you ran that far.
Yeah.
right.
No, you're
Yeah.
only going to run about 100 feet before it kills you.
Yeah.
So if you're not away from it, then it's over.
Now,
Yeah,
you
another
need-
mile and a half
You
ain't
need
going
to
to
demonstrate that you could that your heart works in an efficient way.
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
do
yeah.
that some other way than running 2 miles.
Well,
But-
some aerobic doctor came up with the thing. You thought, what's this have to do with, well, you're not going to be a good firefighter if you're this. So, well, you never knew smut, did you? Doc,
Yeah.
he couldn't run 2 miles, but he could carry 8 of you into a building and out of a building.
So once again, you use that hiring practices and you point it back to the work. So once again, go back to the work, and you can use that. I mean, you can use that everywhere. Is if you describe the work well enough to people and they understand the work, because most people, they don't know what firefighters do. I mean, you're on the scene of a fire and you got people standing around the building. They don't have a clue what we're doing there.
No,
now
they
you
don't.
think they think they know, but when you
The
really
mayor doesn't
describe it,
know.
and not even just a fire. I'm talking. We should describe all parts of our job, and that's what we're doing with this program. Is we're kind of breaking it
The
down.
next module, we're going to talk about, talk about the work in the 4 major categories: fire, EMS, hazmat, special ops. Here's what those core standards look like.
And we talk about that, and then we are going to kind of break that down and talk about why they're important, why we do, how we got to where we are, and then also who kind of regulates those areas, who decides what the qualifications for an EMT is, for a paramedic. Is that an outside agency? Yeah, we all know that.
Swiftwater rescue technician.
Same thing. Hazmat. Who decides? So we really get into the detail of where this all comes from, and then once again, how you can use that internally in your organization.
See, and I think you need to explain it to firefighters too, because we have the benefit in our jobs of we get to go out and meet tons of different fire departments, right? Mm-hmm. And I can walk into a fire department where I can tell they care about their core service and they're delivering good service, and their attitudes and the way that they interact with each other and the public is so much more enlightened than some of the departments that we go to, where you hear about the grievances and they're mad at the chief, and the city council's trying to screw us over, and they've got their attention on all these other things other than the work. They don't even think about the work because for whatever reason they're distracted by 100 other things, or like Bruno did, they weren't focused, and they didn't have a leader who was focusing them on the work. And I see it all the time, but I also see very positive places where
you have
they are about the work.
All ranges, right? And the other thing you made me think of is, so the labor president and the union has to be your partner in that. So they need to be able to go out and describe the work as they're out doing their politics and everything that they do. They need to be on the same page as you. And what happens in a lot of these organizations, what I see, is the labor group has a better opportunity to talk to the membership than the fire chief does. It's just the way their communication works. We go through a chain of command, and it's, you got the formal leaders and the positional. They got the stewards. They feel more comfortable. They talk about it. So if you're not careful, you can get the labor group pulling you into a conversation away from the work and away from the way you want your culture to be. And you need to have a strong relationship with them and say, hey, that's important, all the things you're talking about, but let's tie it back over to here and not pull our members' focus too far away from that. Like right now in fire stations with the election coming up, we're going to have a lot of conversations about stuff other than the work. And if a fire chief doesn't get ahead of that and say, hey, here's some parameters for our discussions, and he or she's not going to be in every fire station to manage that, but they need to at least have conversations about, we need to focus on the work, focus on Mrs. Smith. And that's what Bruno did. He understood the work, and then he really got a better understanding, especially the way Nick wrote it up in our introduction and the way Bruno describes it in the interviews, is once he identified Mrs. Smith as the customer, and then you tie the work, which is the core services, to Mrs. Smith, the added value, that's where you really start moving your organization forward.
Well, in 1985, so we're doing our thing, and we're a bunch of B shifters and just self-actualizing and having fun doing the work, is we have a 4 to 6 minute response time for emergency calls, right? One of the issues we're dealing with is the emergency transportation. So we would go on a call. We'd be doing CPR, whatever. You have a patient that needs to go to the hospital immediately. You call for an ambulance. Sometimes it would take 30, 45 minutes. Sometimes you would never get the ambulance. They would call and say, we're not coming. There were times where the ambulances would tell you, the companies, if you can't get a pizza delivered, you're not getting an ambulance to your front door. And there were parts of town you couldn't get an ambulance. So, I mean, it was just, and there were about a dozen different private companies that did private ambulance during that time. And see, they were in charge because they provided the ambulance service through the state. As they said, no, these are the ambulance. No one else can do it. You have to get permission from the state. So it's these 12 people do this county. So what they did is they came up with a round-robin dispatch system. So now these 12 companies each have 2 or 3 ambos each. And now you're protecting 500 square miles. Where do I put my 2 ambulances to get a decent response time? Well, I got 12 companies. They all got 2 or 3 ambos, so I got 2 to 3 dozen ambulances available. The problem is they're never where they need to be. And now when I call them, it is based on the equity of the business. So, no. You got called first, then you go to me, then the one under me, and then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 down the list. When you get to 12, you go back up to 1. And so now our average time was over 20 minutes to get an ambulance. And now it's starting to be an issue in the hospitals and with the companies, and people are getting pissed. The fire chief, Mr. I'm in charge of this, says, I want to take the ambos over. He calls his good friend, the union president, in and says, well, I'm going to take the ambos over. Well, the union president says, oh, that's another 200 union paying dues. Mm-hmm. I want to take the ambos over. So between the two of them, 6 months, we took the ambos over. They went to the state. They did all the political stuff. So now now you can imagine, in a very red state at the time, what's going to happen when the blue government takes over from private business, what that's going to sound like. Yeah. All that went up. People didn't care because they said, no, the fire department cares about us. And so the city council said, nah, you're giving it to the fire department. So boom, boom, boom. We ended up with the ambulance service. So over the next couple years, they're figuring out how the hell do we run an ambo service? Now, you got a lot of leeway because we're a big fire department. You got 40 facilities you can. So we knocked the time down, right? So it went from 20 minutes to less than 10 minutes. And then the price, as they said, they're going to kill you on the price. Fire chief said, if your insurance doesn't pay, it's free. The city came in and said, no, it ain't. You can't. And he says, yeah, it is. And they said, no. Budget and research says it's not. Okay. Yeah. But he says,
the government service.
He said, what's the lowest? They said $160. He says, that's what it costs. $160. That's what all the ambo rides are going to be.
But Nick, you said it really quick, but it's really the core of that, and you wrote it up very well in our program, is that the key was that the citizens said, yes, we want the firefighters to have the ambulance because of the way they were treated. You said it quick, and we've been talking about treatment, but that was, if they would have been treated any way different, or if there would have been a dozen people that were the vocal minority that said, no, these firefighters treated me like shit.
Well, they would have been suspect then. No, they want it because they're going to pull some scam and it's going to fatten their pockets. And
well, I wanted to talk about that because when you're talking about the slipper story and the goodwill that you build, if you didn't have the goodwill, they would have said no to the ambulances. That would have never happened, or anything else, or new fire station, or adding anybody.
It got to the point in our city where the unions all negotiate with the city. Is over a period of time, by the time I had 7-8 years on, is none of the unions would negotiate with the city. They said, no, we're going to wait till the end, and we want whatever the firefighters get. And the city's like, no. they've got the people behind them. You don't.
They couldn't afford. They couldn't afford it.
No, there's no way. We're not going to do that. And so our union knew it, and they're like, "No, man, we can't." And in fact, in this leadership thing, you're going to hear the man himself say, "No, zip it. Let the customer brag about you." Yeah. And if there's pain to be spread across city departments, you got to take your share. You can't be special. All you can be is more independent, really. Is if we will take care of our own business, then that allows us to take care of our business and not somebody else. And, the strongest thing we ever had, and the reason it worked with us, is we had a very strong fire chief and a very strong union president.
And they were connected.
It was like having an army and a navy. You were going to win almost every single time because they were always going to do what was right. I mean, that's all I ever saw.
But 6 separate incidents while guys are shopping could set that whole thing backwards.
Oh, 2 or 3 things.
Years.
Yeah.
So that's what this program talks about is now how do you maintain it? Here's how you do it. How do you maintain it? How do you hire people that have those similar values? And when people talk about values and mission statement, their eyes roll back. It's like, not this again. But it's very valuable to understand values in a way that you can project them onto your customers. And that's what we're talking about is how do you take those values of being nice and project that on the customer in a way that the customer goes, oh, those guys are nice. They really, people would fly into Phoenix and they would have an experience on an airplane, a medical experience on an airplane. And when that experience was over, you had 120 passengers going back to their communities, wherever they came from, going, oh, you got to see the Phoenix Fire Department. I heard about it all the time. And we get to brag about it now. When we're in the middle of it, you don't brag about it. Like Bruno says, no, let the customer. But I would hear guys saying, yeah, I had a cousin that flew into Phoenix, and this has happened on the plane. Do you guys really treat people like that? Right?
Yeah. Well, and you could take it too far. And we know some people, if you said some names, you'd say, nah, that's now he's Glant Haddon.
No open mouth kissing.
Yeah. But I mean, it was exactly. We're not going to, you had a fire, I'm not going to show up and paint your house tomorrow. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about finishing the call, basically. Is if there's some little piece that you can do, especially in an emotional way that's going to make the customer feel better, you're authorized to do that. That's what added value is.
So it's that seeing the situation or the incident or the EMS call or whatever in both your professional terms, as we talk about, which firefighters should look at that very professional, and then understanding the personal viewpoints of the customer. So you're looking at it personally and you're looking at it professionally, because honestly, I don't think there's a lot of customers who care about the way we cut a roof or the way we dragged a hose line or the way we did this with our, remember that? You remember that?
Make the war face like Johnny Gage.
And you do that. I remember doing that in the 80s. Yeah. I was there. Mm-hmm. And all they want to do is, how did you treat their grandma? How did you treat, and Bruno says it in one of the videos, firefighters could go in the back room of somebody's house and cut the pajamas off their 8-year-old daughter because they had that kind of trust. Man, that goes away really fast if you're not careful.
Or you do a bunch, self-serving stuff. It's just, it's not good.
And then, but it takes consistent management and leadership throughout, and it has to start with a vision, and it has to be processed every day. You can't say, okay, today's the day I'm not really want to do that added value. And it just, they're small things. It doesn't take a lot. We're not talking about laying concrete, which we've heard about. You can do that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something very nice, very simple. You walk away, leaving the people feel they're having a bad day. You leave them feel a little bit better about their day when you're done with them, right?
I worked around a police chief that was not very good with customer service several years ago. And guys were getting coffee. There was an engine crew getting coffee. Lady walks up, it's raining out, she's crying. She's like, I locked myself out of my house, down the street. I don't have a cell phone. They put her in the engine, took her back home, and started to get her problem solved. And she loved the fire department for that. The police department was pretty upset that we let a civilian ride inside the engine. And it's like, well, you guys arrest people all the time. You have them cuffed. I don't know if you even put them in a seatbelt. They can ride in your cop cars. Why can't we have somebody ride in the engine?
So see, that's the reason there's not a prick running the fire department. And that's there you go.
And that lady was so happy with the fire department at the end of that whole encounter because they helped her take care of her problem. It wasn't a 911 problem.
The liability of letting her ride on the fire engine.
Well,
really?
I guarantee you that police chief, because I've been in this situation too, when he heard about that, he went and had a conversation with his boss, with legal, with finance, with HR, with everybody. Did you hear what these guys did? And fire chiefs across the country are sitting across from police chiefs, and the police chiefs go, why do people love you? Because it happened to me. Why do people love firefighters so much?
Yeah, they don't want to defund us because, we don't. And, we gave her a ride home, buddy. We didn't yell at her.
That's it. And some of the, I just worked with the police chief in Glendale. He was a really good guy, and he would tease me about it because he loved it. He's like, Jesus, firefighters. He goes, I saw you guys the other day doing this.
You know, the toughest things we have, the toughest call the fire department goes on is any incident where there's no core services to deliver.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so now you're doing, that's a social ills call. Is somebody sleeping on the sidewalk? Well, they're healthy. There's nothing. I got nothing. There's no value to add because there's no reason for me to be here right now. So those are the ones that you kind of have to. All I can leave you with is a little added value, buddy. That's it. So
here's a blanket. And
a bottle of water. But past that, I don't have a solution for this. The fire department does not have a solution for homelessness. For mental instability. I mean, there's just certain ills in society that we have to figure out as a group. See, the police are the most victimized by that because theirs is even worse. If there is no core services, well, if there are core services, they're going to piss everybody off, just the nature of their work. And if there aren't, it's that they'll, well, no, you don't engage them at this point. You're like, oh, yeah.
Earlier this month, I'm talking to somebody, and they were talking about the Phoenix Fire Department, and he had visited here 20 years ago. And he told me about the encounter that he had at the fire station, and it's exactly as what you guys would expect. As a matter of fact, Jeff Griffin was the captain there. Like, he starts describing to me the guy who he's talking to. It's like, well, that's Jeff Griffin. He fell through the roof, and he had the whole story, and he talked to him and showed him around and made him feel welcome. And it's like, I wouldn't expect in that era of this fire department anything different than that. That was the example that we all wanted to be, was walk around. So I talked to another guy who is in a resort town, not where Disney is, but where there's an amusement park. And the firefighters there are pissed when anybody comes by and visits. They're like they're just too busy.
Yeah.
You know, they're in the middle of Ohio where there's an amusement park and a lot of tourists, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. So I kind of wonder, like, how successful is your fire department? I wonder how often the uniform inspections are and what you're really doing for service when you go out there. Because if you're pissed about visitors, you're in the wrong business.
So, and you're right. So my wife and I, we get to... my wife
I was just thinking about Carl, the German. Yeah. Are you a visitor at 11?
My wife and I get to travel because I'm retired now, and we'll go around. But I'm not a fire buff. I don't stop into fire stations. But it seems like we do a lot of walking in Chicago, New York, or wherever we go, right? And we'll walk by a fire station, and about half the time the door's up, and the firefighters are there. And I'll say hi to them. Never say I'm a firefighter.
Yeah.
I'm not flying colors. And just based on their response, I can almost go, okay.
Yeah.
And luckily, the bigger cities that I'm in, the busy cities, they are really friendly. Station 8, you know, the big one that we always hear about, walking by there, hey, how you doing? Have a nice evening. Well, come in. What are you doing?
Buy a T-shirt. Well, Station 76 in Chicago, across from Wrigley Field.
Yeah,
they love to have visitors. I mean, they're selling T-shirts, having a good time.
But they're you know, if they're nice to somebody walking by without a core service need, they're going to be nice to people.
Yeah. Busy stations. If you the busiest stations, you have the friendliest. They just love and do anything for you. It's crazy. As a BC, the biggest issues I had came out of the slowest stations. They had too much time. It was like a prison. All they did is screwed with each other. Nuts.
Let's put a bow on the added value work part. Talk about the conference, the class you're going to do, the module when it comes out. Then we'll do a timeless tactical.
We're going to have an awesome module. It's going to be fun. We're going to stand up. We're going to discuss all of this, and we'll figure what we're going to discuss in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, Nick's already saying that he's going to do whatever you put up on the screen.
I saw you said that, and so we're actually
Garrison put something up on the screen today. So
what we'd like to do is that. So the introduction, I think Nick's going to place online. You guys are here pretty soon.
Yeah. In fact, this podcast, we're announcing the first leadership modules up and posted.
Okay.
So that's the introduction.
Yeah.
So the first function is function number 1, the work. And we're going to, during our class, we intend to talk about the work and give a little presentation on that. We don't have enough time to go into all of it and what it would look like on the online program, but I think we're going to introduce that.
Yeah.
We might even share a scenario or two and get some interaction with the people in the class, because we have an opportunity, just like with the blue card. You don't have to make this stuff up, right? Like Bruno said, you don't have to plant weeds. So we may have a couple scenarios we share with the group and kind of like, okay, does this look like it focused on the work, and how would you pull this back to focus on the work? And we hope to have a lot of fun with that. Mm-hmm. But I think that's about it. We're going to try to mostly talk about function 1 in the work right now. Maybe.
And
possibly, yeah.
And at our conference?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably going to be mostly the work. That's what it's going to be.
Well, that absolutely helped me be a great fire chief, I think. And I'm not saying that I'm great. I had a philosophy because of being around Chief Alan Brunacini that helped our organization be focused on the work, focused on customer service. We didn't care about a lot of petty BS. And it really served us well because, whether it's the goodwill that you're asking for something, more personnel, more stations, headquarters, whatever it is.
You just get along better with people.
It's just going to be a better deal.
And you're not doing it so I get more. No. That's not why. I do it because this is my job. I want to be good at my job. That's why. And thanks.
Well, there's a ton of pride and satisfaction that comes out of that, though, too. I mean, that's really the self-sustaining part of it.
Well, you got people thanking you for your service. He's like, really? Thanks for the pension then. I took more than I got. So that's how I feel.
Most of us, when we treat somebody fairly bad and we walk away, we don't feel good about it.
No.
We may tell ourselves we do for about a minute, but you walk away and you go, that didn't feel like that.
Being the nice guys and adding value, we still would be assholes occasionally. But this would help snap you out of it and align you in the right way. It's like and there were times you would have a run where you wouldn't sleep for a little while, and you think, no, I'm going to need therapy or something, but I can't keep doing this.
Don't get off the truck.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you would need to take a shift or 2 off. And that we call them mental health days if you took sick leave. Yeah. That's what it was. Well, the department gave you 5 sick leave occurrences a year, 2 shifts each occurrence you could take. So you could take 10 shifts of sick leave a year without a doctor's note. It was authorized by the department.
You had to have the sick leave in your bank.
Yeah.
So and the other thing that I want to say before we go, what I found out is that when Nick put together this, the introduction, there's 3 of us teaching. It is really cool. So I think we're going to pull in Bruno's videos, hopefully a little bit at the conference too, because it really is. It feels like you talk, I talk, and then we put them on the screen and we're all talking about this. Of course, he has a better way to do it. He's like John Madden. Do you miss John Madden?
Oh, yes.
He was John Madden.
He was. In fact, John Madden, Madden football, the video game, biggest selling sports video game of all time.
Yeah.
There were 2 video guys that made that, programmers, and they called Madden and got hooked up with him because he was the most famous guy, Monday Night Football. Yeah. And they said, we want you to be the commentator for this. And they started up, and they only wanted like 4 or 5 players on each team. because it was because processing you
hard.
couldn't do
Difficult.
back when they started doing it and have the same experience. And John Madden says, "Oh, okay. Well, thank you for asking me, but I can't help you with your project." And I said, "Well, why not?" He says, "Well, because football is played with 11 people on each side of the ball, and you ain't doing football." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Okay, I'll stay." And he stayed, and then
Focus on that was the work.
it was the work.
It can be done
So
by
John
11
Madden said,
guys.
so like NFPA staffing standards. And you're like, well, no, you can't do anything. John Madden did it. Yeah, man, that's it.
I love it. So that's it. So we're going to pull that in. So look forward to that too. We're going to have him in the room with us.
Yeah, AVB, there's no videos of me and Garrison in the intro module. It's all Alan Brunacini. There's one picture of the two of us, so I could introduce us. That's it.
It's this picture.
Yeah, he's the only one speaking.
So whether you see this at the conference or you get online and start the Silverback first module, you're going to get a taste of one way or the other. You don't have to be at the
You'll
conference.
see what it is.
You'll see what it is. It's going to be fantastic. I really appreciate you guys bringing that, because this is how to operate a fire department. I mean, if people are looking for the secret sauce, you guys are going to reveal the recipe of the secret sauce
And it's
during
so
these
simple,
modules.
man. It's ketchup.
Yeah.
Hey, man, it's just doing your job.
Yeah.
It's easy. Yeah.
Now I'm more of a mustard guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Ketchup on fries, yes, all day long, but never on a burger. Ugh.
Want to do a timeless tactical truth?
Oh, every day.
All right.
All right.
Timeless tactical truth. And today's timeless tactical truth from Alan Brunacini: it is neither wealth or splendor, but tranquility and occupation which gives happiness.
Buddha.
See, we just called him John Madden. And I was thinking on the John Madden thing is that, but there were times that he would ask me a question at a conference, Chief Garrison, Chief G, and he'd ask me, and I go, Bruno, I'm sorry, I don't have a clue what you just said. Can you dummy that down for a B shifter? So could you read that again? Because I think most people want to hear that more than once.
It is neither wealth nor splendor, but tranquility and occupation which gives happiness.
A job well done, man. That's it. I contributed the way I was supposed to. I was part, and that's kind of the. When you look at like a engine 1, ladder 4, those are crews, and you have a role within that crew. You got to do your part for that crew to be effective. So that's the whole thing. It's all geared off the work we do. That's why we're here.
And you know, and that applies so much as a leader at any level, right? Whether you're a supervisor or whether you're the fire chief. And it also applies in the cool command concept that Nick kind of talked about on the fire ground too. But that tranquility part where you really feel like I am comfortable with the way that we just talked about, how you feel uncomfortable when you're not nice to people. Later you walk away going, I feel like I need to shower, or, because I didn't do very well.
That was it. Being comfortable, like managing the strategy.
That's what tranquility to me is. It's like comfortable in your position, comfortable in your own skin, comfortable in the fact that some guy's wearing some goofy shoes, and instead of taking a picture of it and sending it to the fire chief like I have received as a fire chief, what are you going to do about this? Yeah, your Be Nice is working well. This guy's wearing Crocs at work. I don't give a shit if he's wearing Crocs at the fire station. Maybe he has a corn. I don't know. But it's like, go back to, that guy's not tranquil. That guy's not enjoying. Whoever that leader is that sent me that, he was not enjoying that. But if he would have walked up to that guy.
No, he should have been a police chief.
You could have walked up to that guy and says, hey, nice shoes, but, today, wear different shoes today. I like you, whatever it is, but instead it goes to a chain of command. I'm sitting in my office. I get this letter with a picture of the guy's shoes. Fuddrucker, he called him. And it's like, dude, you could have solved all that.
I remember Bruno talking about gotcha management style. Like the people who are just waiting, lying in wait to try to catch somebody doing something.
In gotcha.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, like the shoe thing. Somebody was talking about a meeting he had with a bunch of captains, and the captains came in, and they were bitching that they couldn't get their crews to dress properly, to wear the right uniform. And his first reaction is he wanted to fire those 2 captains that were bitching about that. Like, you shouldn't even be captains. In fact, you shouldn't even be affiliated with this organization. You're a supervisor on the fire department and you can't get them to wear the right uniform. A flight attendant can get 150 people to put a seatbelt on that don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do your job. And I knew who those and he should have. Those guys were the worst captains, but they always had the right uniform on. They just couldn't get their crew to do it. And not good.
You can't trust them to do that. How do you trust them to manage a fire or hazard zone?
Exactly. Well, we're talking about tranquility. Like, just people upset your tranquility. Like, you're the IC, and like the strategy, you're not tranquil with it. Well, you need to change the strategy then. No, they shouldn't be inside, or sometimes you go inside and put the fire out, if they're younger and not, sometimes you have to be a little more. But most of the time it was, no, it's time to get out. This is not going to look well in another 3 or 4 minutes.
Here's the difference between a guy who does his job and enjoys it and a guy who's not very good at it and doesn't totally understand it. Think surfing. When I go out surfing, I am scared to death of sharks, waves, drowning, boats. And I look over at the dude, and he's tranquil.
Yeah.
And he's in an 8-foot, catching the wave, toes in the front of the board, rocking and rolling. His hair don't even mess up. That guy's enjoying his tranquility. I'm out here on my board thinking, I'm gonna die. That's where that'd be nice to be a supervisor or a leader like that. Like, I'm comfortable enough to throw my toes out, throw my head back, and just kind of be tranquil because I know what the hell I'm doing. And I know what's happening around me, and it doesn't scare me. Right? I don't know why I thought of that. That's just
yeah, man. Yeah. Well, that guy surfed a lot more than you did.
Hang loose, bro. All right, that's it, guys. Thanks so much for being on this Bee Shifter. Thanks to Nick and Terry. Silverback leadership. Look for it if you're a blue card user, or we'll see you with it at the conference, too. There's a couple ways you're going to get that.
Yeehaw.
Till next time, thanks so much for listening to Bee Shifter.